You're listening to Radio Kidnappers, the voice of Hawke's Bay. It's that time of week again, time for us to be talking to the wonderful Lou from Wardini Books, and this program is called...
The Wonderful World of Wardini Books. Comes around quickly, doesn't it?
I was just about to say to Kelly, my colleague, I think, can you believe it's been a whole week since Lou was here? It just seems like you were here yesterday.
I know, darkening your door again.
And here we are, a month halfway through.
Yep.
God, the year flies, especially when you get to my age, you think, geez, where'd that go? Here
Soon
I
be
am.
Christmas.
That's right. Anyway, three more fabulous books to look at, and it looks like a couple of my books for children. And the first one is called Saving Mr. Hoot. I love it.
It is Saving Mr. Hoot by Helen Stephens, and I should just say that I've got a couple of picture books because I've been reading ahead. So all the books that I'm reading at the moment, they're grown-up books. They're not out yet.
Oh, really?
So even this grown-up book that I'll tell you about is not quite out yet. So
Yeah.
I don't want to keep doing that.
Good point. I mean, are books seasonal? I would have just thought books came in and came in and came in.
Yeah, well, they do. They come in every month,
Yeah.
but it's quite nice for, especially now that everything takes so long to come. If you read things that are coming out next month, you can order appropriately.
Oh,
you know,
right,
if
I
I
see,
really
yes.
like it,
Yeah.
then I'll order more. If I don't like it, then I won't bother.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway,
How do you work it out? I mean, it's thousands of books. What makes you decide?
just some things capture your imagination, or you know you've got a market for that in your particular shop.
Yeah.
Like we've got a really good burgeoning science fiction fantasy section through Cass, who
Yes.
works in our Havelock store, and it's starting to take a hold over in Napier too. So it's just like, okay, this is
Yeah.
what the people
It's
want.
a bit of a niche for you.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
I interrupted you. Sorry about
No,
that.
no, it's great.
Saving
Yeah.
Mr. Hoot.
Saving Mr. Hoot, beautiful cover. It's by Helen Stephens, and in this book there is a little boy, and he is quite little. He looks like a toddler to me, and he looks about 3
Yes,
or
he
4,
does.
doesn't he?
Yes.
And his name is Ben. He lives with mum and dad, and he has met and formed a relationship with an owl that lives outside. Obviously, lives outside his home,
Yes.
and he's called him Mr. Hoot. But the thing is, the parents haven't seen Mr. Hoot, so he's like, "Look, there's Mr. Hoot," and then Mr. Hoot just shh, and hides in his nest when Dad looks out the window. So they think that Ben's got an imaginary friend.
Right.
Especially when things happen like Ben's got his bedtime biscuit and he's turned his back for 1 minute and Mr. Hoot's nicked his bedtime OT biscuit. And of course he says, "Mum, Mr. Hoot nicked it." And she's like, "Uh-huh."
Yeah, right. Yes.
But she still gives him another biscuit. It's really quite sweet. Lovely illustrations. And look, he drops his glove and Mr. Hoot nicks it. And Dad's like, "Uh-huh."
Oh, yeah. Dad's not looking at his phone there, is
Dad's
he?
looking at his phone.
Yeah, that's right.
There are little cautionary tales in here for grown-ups, I think. You know,
Yes.
pay attention. Come on, that
that's
kid's
right.
3 for a heartbeat.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, and on we go, and it's quite lovely. And he calls, "Hoo-hoo," and Mr. Hoot speaks back to him, and they have little conversations. And then one day, Ben goes out for a walk with his mum. Mum's clearly in a rush, and there's a sign up next to Mr. Hoot's big old tree felling.
Oh,
and
no.
Ben's like, "What does that mean?" "Oh, it's sad they're chopping the old tree down." Ben couldn't believe it because that is Mr. Hoot's home. And then Ben goes on and on and on, and he can't get any response from Mr. Hoot. And he's like, "Oh no, what's going to happen?" And so he manages to, where are all the creatures going to go? He manages to convince his parents. He hears a chainsaw one morning, and he's like, "Right, I'm getting out there and I'm saving Mr. Hoot." And I love that she's still got the toothpaste in her hand, and Dad's running after him with his coffee slopping all over the place, and they're in their jammies, and he's just, "Stop,
Yeah.
there are owls in that tree, there's an owl in that tree." And then all the neighbours get on board, and they're like, "Okay, who's Mr. Hoot? What's going on?" And he calls and calls, and Mr. Hoot is not calling back, and eventually he gets a reply. Long silence, and then hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo. And what's happened is there's Mr. Hoot and Mrs. Hoot and 3 eggs.
All right, they've got a whole little family in there.
And that tiny, tiny boy saves the owl family. And then there's 3 babies.
Look at that. And there's a moral in there, isn't there?
Oh, there's all sorts of things in
Yeah,
there. Listen to
absolutely.
kids for a
Yeah, that's
start.
right,
Listen
yeah.
to them. And also, it really does worry me when things get chopped down because people don't always think about
No.
what is living in
Yeah,
there.
exactly. And how
Yeah.
long does a tree take to grow that big?
Yeah.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I know there are sometimes
I
health
love
and
trees.
safety issues with branches falling and
course.
things, but do we get a bit prissy about that?
Yes,
I
we
don't
do.
know.
Absolutely, we do, yes.
Anyway, isn't that lovely?
That is a lovely book. Who's
Yeah.
going to appeal to that?
So, you know, kids are about 2 and 3 and up, I think, and there's a lot to look at in the pictures as well.
Yes,
you know,
there
we
is.
kind of just flicked through there, but he's even got a book about owls on the floor and all these little toys on the floor.
I bet you don't even need the words hardly. the pictures tell the story themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a nice thing to do with small children. Like, what do you think's going on in that picture?
Yeah.
And
so
they'll
many
tell
things
you
to
what
point out.
things,
What do you think there is? And what's that? And what's that? Yeah.
and they'll tell you things you haven't noticed.
Yeah. What noise does a chainsaw make? Yeah. That's right.
Do it, Ken.
No, go.
It is an air, isn't it? Absolutely.
Tell us about Faraway Things.
Isn't that pretty?
I love that picture.
Yeah, isn't it gorgeous? So that is a story by Dave Eggers, who's written all sorts of award-winning stories for grown-ups and young people. And it says art by Kelly Murphy. It's not illustrators.
No,
it's
it
art
is
by
art
Kelly
too,
Murphy.
yes.
Yeah. And this is a little boy called Lucien, and he lives up high up on a hill with his mum, just his mum. And that's their house. And the lighthouse is right next to
Wow.
it. And as you read through the book, you realise that Lucien's dad is gone. And he clearly misses him. And the lighthouse is all shut up. So, but what Lucien's father used to call things that Lucien picks up on the beach is faraway things, because they've come out of the sea from far away. And he's looking around, and today he's found a heavy red rope, and then he sees something bright. And it's this, and he's trying to remember what they're called, and he goes through it, and he's like, it's not a sabre, they're longer, not a foil, they're skinny and almost weightless. Then he's like, cutlass.
Yes,
and he slashes it around, cutlass, he's yelling on the beach, and he's found it. And this is quite a gorgeous thing in here. He goes home, and he doesn't really want to show his mum, because I think he thinks she'll take it off him. Yeah, that's it. So I was like, oh yes, I found some marvellous faraway things today, thank you. And again, the things that are in the picture, you can just sit there and examine.
What a cool room.
Yeah. All his faraway things and the things that he's found over the years. And he dreams about his dad, and that keeps his dad alive for him. And it's quite lovely, because his memories are failing. This is my favourite page. So he's playing with the cutlass. Don't do this at home, kids. He used the blade to cut driftwood and seawood, and once he even cut the sun in two like an orange. It recovered. I think that's just gorgeous.
It's lovely, isn't it?
So anyway, what happens is there's this massive boat out at sea, ship out at sea, and it's coming closer and closer and closer, and a little skiff separates from it, and three people come aboard and a little splodgy dog. And he says, I can tell he's the captain because he looks in charge. And look what he's got hanging from his belt, though.
He's got a scabbard for his cutlass.
Yeah. And he's like, we could have used that lighthouse a couple of nights ago. We're stranded on a sandbar. And have you seen my... Oh. And he sees Lucien just put it behind his back, and he realises that Lucien doesn't want to give this up. And he's like, I don't know how to say this, but that's mine, you know. And they try to negotiate. Lucien doesn't want to give it up. But he says, look... If you come over to my ship, you can take any... I've got all sorts of treasures. You can swap it out for something, you know, and choose very carefully. And so that's what they do. And he knows that his mum wouldn't like him tying his little dinghy to their skiff and going over to this strange ship, but he does it anyway. And he goes over, and there's all sorts going on. They're trying to dig the ship out the sandbar. But look at that for a picture as well.
Wow.
I spent quite a lot of time thinking, what would I choose if I was in that...
And what did you decide?
I don't know. I still have. I like all sorts of things. The thing that struck me most, that there is a whole piece of cake on his desk and he hasn't eaten it. What is going on with that?
What's wrong with that cake?
Yeah, he's got a bottle of wine on the side. All it's missing is a coffee machine, in my opinion. Anyway, Lucien knows. He sees it and he knows. And he's
that lantern.
Where's he going to put that?
Yes, he's going to put that in the secret room. In the
isn't
lighthouse.
In the lighthouse. So that's it. And he's let go of the cutlass, and he's found this thing. And there he goes. And he's gone up, and that lighthouse is opened up again. And he watches the sun go down. And it's really about just him letting go.
Yes.
He let the cutlass go. It's gone. And he's got this thing, and it's in his heart, but he can move on a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
What a lovely story.
Just beautiful, isn't it?
It is a great story.
Yeah. I love it. I love it a lot.
I was waiting for. I was wanting you to get to the end, so I knew what happened. It was such a good story.
I should have read you the whole thing. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. And winding up today's reviews is a book called Breathless.
Yes, Breathless by Amy McCulloch, and it's a grown-up thriller, and it's out in February, so it's not far off, and it's so exciting. It's such a page turner. So what you've got is it's in the climbing community, mountain climbing community, and there is the big cheese called Charles McVeigh, and he is as testosterone fueled as he sounds, and he is doing like an alpine style, no oxygen, no assistance he's going to climb all the over 8,000 metre peaks in a year, and it's massive in the climbing community, and it's going to be like, it's impossible, and, all this kind of thing. So he's going to do it. And there's a young journalist called Cecily, and she's quite fit as a flea, and her boyfriend James is a bit of a mountaineer, and he's a journalist too, and he's desperate to get an interview with this Charles McVeigh. But she has quite an experience up in Snowdonia in Wales, and writes about it. And she writes this blog called Failure to Rise, because she's had a terrible thing happen to her. And she writes about how she's completely biffed everything up. And it goes viral. And Charles McVeigh reads it, and he gets in touch with her and says, "You are the journalist I want. If you summit this last peak with me," assisted, and oxygen, Sherpas, the whole thing, it's in Nepal, then I will give you this exclusive interview with me, Charles. And he's very like that, and she's like, oh my God, this could totally make my career. Her partner, James, is so jealous that they split up. Like, he just biffs her out. It's just incredible. You're like, well, I think he wasn't good for you anyway. But anyway... So so that's the background to it. And then you're on the mountain, and she's training, and she's getting ready, and the great Charles is going to fly in by helicopter to base camp at another point. The great strength of this is that you are on that mountain with her, like every step of the way. The ropes and the guidelines and the Sherpas and the Sherpas, man, how they do all the flipping work.
I know.
It's incredible. But then the actual sort of murdery plot thing comes in when one of another crew, because there's several crews up there, another guide's crew, somebody's found dead, and that's like before they've even started. And then there's another death halfway up the mountain, and then there's accusations against certain people, and there's all this sort of conspiracy about what's going on, and Cecily just becomes more and more paranoid. She can hear someone whistling outside her tent in the night time, like an eerie whisper, and everyone's like, you're bonkers, and if you're going to be bonkers, you can't come. So she's got to swallow it all down, and the tension just wraps up and ramps up, and it actually starts with summit day and how her heart is racing, and she's got no oxygen, and she's near the top of the mountain, and what's going on, but there's somebody stalking her, and she's got to get down the mountain.
Well,
and the mists rolled in, and so
yes.
It's about what gets Cecily from there to there, and what the hell's going on up there. It's really dangerous the whole way through. Yeah,
it's hard to believe that you bought that book in, because this week in particular, I have been enthralled at home watching movies on free climbing.
Oh, have you watched that Free Solo or whatever it is?
Oh, I don't know what it's called, but it's all different little YouTube clips about guys who are climbing sheer faces, and you think, and they're only using their fingers and their feet, and there's nothing really to stand on.
Yeah.
And man,
and you can barely watch it.
I know, you've got to
there.
close your eyes sometimes. Jeez, I hope it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
But have you ever done that?
No. No, I've done bouldering in the gyms and things, but if you fall, there's a crash mat there, and it's not that far away.
The courage that these people have inside them, they must have no fear at all. Yeah. Anyway, if you want any of these fabulous books, where do we get them?
Wardini books, please. That would be marvellous.
My pleasure, as always, Lou. You look after yourself. We'll talk to the same time, same place next week.
Lovely. Thanks, Ken.